Just because you're working with a sewing pattern with a larger bust size or cup size range doesn't mean that you're in the clear for pattern adjustments. Same thing goes for people who have larger busts and larger waists. It also doesn't mean that you don't have petite adjustments that you need to be making to your pattern. In this video, we're going to be talking about where on your sewing pattern to look for to make your petite adjustments so you can get a better fit. To talk about what petite sizing is as a whole, I have my little drawings here so that you can kind of get an idea of just generally how it works. Again, these are generalities, these are averages. So let's go ahead and look at the iPad screen. Now, I did do these little croquis just to kind of illustrate them. They're not proportional, but I think the message will still get across. All right, so in these instances, I have the same little croquis side by side, but here's what you have to start to take into account. For the Mrs. Average, they're usually based off a block that's for a person who's about 5'5", somewhere in that range. For petites are on average 5'2". So just imagine what that looks like to be 5'5" and 5'2", and just like everything shrinks, everything gets smaller. So if we're looking at these two drawings that are side by side, petites are going to have, and let me go ahead and make sure I'm on the right pen, their torso is going to be shorter, right? So the waist will go up. The distance here between the top of their shoulder and like the bust point will be shorter because again, all measurements are shortening and getting smaller. Also from their waist down to their hips will also be shorter. So that'll decrease as well. Additionally, and this one's my favorite, the one that I notice the most in everything that I wear, and you know, if you're petite measurements, you're also going to see this as well, is that the distance between the center front and the tip of my shoulders is so much less than what it is on a regular block. So there are some pattern companies where I make a muslin for the first time, and the tip of the shoulder is completely falling off. So that's like center front to like that shoulder, right? Now, oops, should probably draw the line correctly. Okay, so what does this actually mean in practicality? That means that not only is there a smaller top of the torso, there's also a smaller bottom of the torso. That means that this distance is tiny. You have to do an adjustment there. You also have to do an adjustment to get the shoulders into the right place. Now, another thing that's a challenge is also that because you're just smaller overall, the arms tend to also be a little bit more thin. And then obviously shorter with the legs as well. I do want to highlight, and this is something that, you know, I mentioned at the top of the video, and let me change my pen color, is that you can still have a large bust and a large waist and still maintain these kind of shortened proportions throughout. So for me, for example, I'm rocking double D cup, and that is still on a smaller frame. So even though this measurement can be wider, even though this measurement can also be wider, that can still be on a person that has a tiny frame overall. And so what I find time and time again looking at these different blocks is that there's usually an assumption that you're starting out as this 5'5" person rather than a 5'2" or 5'3". And what does that mean for the distance here? What does that mean for the distance between the bust point and the waist? What does that mean for the distance of the waist down to the knees, right? These are all places that usually have to be shortened throughout, usually pretty proportionally throughout for the entire pattern. I've tried on my dress, and I've seen where I need to do my adjustments. So these are going to be general adjustments. Because I don't have obviously the original block, I'm generally just estimating where these need to occur. Obviously it's going to depend on pattern to pattern. This is the one that was highlighted at the top of the video that you just saw, you know, how it fits. So we're just going to go ahead and do some basic adjustments here so you can kind of get an idea of where they need to occur. All right, so the first one we're going to do is going to be the shoulder one. Now, the shoulders in this particular design are way too long. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually draw in the seam allowance, because everything will kind of hinge on that. I'm going to make sure not to forget the seam allowance. So I usually draw that in first. So I'm going to go pretty far down just to have a little bit to go off of. Now, the shoulders stuck out about 3/4 of an inch. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and measure out the 3/4. So I know that taking out the seam allowance, imagine the seam allowance is gone. So taking out the seam allowance, I still needed it to go in 3/4. Now from here, I know, cool, add in my 5/8. And then from there, that's what you blend back into the arm scythe. So even with everything pulled in, you can see, even another fold, how much more it actually cuts in to be able to make space for a smaller shoulder. Now, obviously, I'm gonna go ahead and unfold that. You're gonna wanna go ahead and taper that completely down the arm scythe. We're going to talk about is actually going to be shortening from the top of the shoulder to like the bottom of the arm scythe. Now for me, I know that the bottom of the arm scythe is way too low. It's way too low. So I know that it's about 3/4 of an inch too low. So I'm just picking kind of I don't want to say a random spot, but more like halfway towards the top, just so that this area or the bottom area doesn't get too distorted. So we're gonna go ahead and just draw a line straight through, and at this point you would cut all the way across and then overlap it for the total of the 3/4, right? So you can see here that there would be this sort of overlap here. Just smooth that out, and that way you can still maintain the original neck and still have taken out a substantial amount in this distance here. So that'll have brought up the arm scythe, that will brought in the shoulder. Now let's talk about the waist. So for this design, and I'm sure you saw in my previous drama of this particular pattern, everything underneath the bust point was just not working. So the distance between the bust and the waist was too much. Now, we know here that the distance between the bottom of the dart and the top of the shirring is 3 inches, which is already too much for me. So I know that in this particular instance, I'm probably gonna have to bring up the waist about 1.5 inches just to get these two closer together. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw in, let's see, I'm gonna actually guesstimate it. I'm gonna bring it up 2 inches. And then from here, you can see, let me double check that is, yep, that's 2 inches. So I'm gonna go ahead and actually kind of draw this around 2 inches. 2 inches. And I'm gonna take my French curve / I don't know, everybody calls it different things, ruler. By the way, I still get comments about that video from hella far back. That's not what you call it. It's what I call it. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and continue to draw this out. And so obviously tapering it out 2 inches there, and we'll smooth it out. So from here, I've essentially brought up the shirring line. I would cut and move the whole piece up. So I'm not gonna be able to do that here without actually cutting into it right now. But I would essentially cut, move this up, and then make sure everything lines up on the end. adjustments, I have just done them to the shell of the dress, but you're going to want to do this to the corresponding pieces and make sure that things line up. So for example, doing these changes on the back and making sure that they line up with the back pieces. Doing these changes on the facing to make sure that they line up. And then also specifically when it comes to like anything on the arm side, if on this design, if you wanted to put in the sleeve, go ahead and also make sure that those corresponding pieces match up. I think for a pattern like this one here that you've seen in this video, it's pretty loose. It doesn't have to be exact, but obviously make sure that you're not guesstimating like I am if you're working on something that's extremely tailored. Obviously continue to make muslins. But let's see what this looks like after I have completed my changes and we have a full completed muslin. Knowing where your body's measurements fit in relationship to the block is huge. It will save you so much time, effort, wasted muslin, wasted tears over something not fitting if you're able to understand if you're petite or not, or where you need to do those measurements. Think about things like being able to immediately say, cool, I know I'm going to have to make these petite adjustments before I go to my muslin stage because I know that these are standard for this company. Or being able to go into, I don't know, a Macy's, a Nordstrom, wherever, to go and try a shirt on and know, okay, cool, I need to go to the petite section because of these reasons. Because if I go to the regular misses sizes, like the sleeve cap's gonna be totally falling off my shoulder, which happens to me all the time. All these measurements and all these adjustments are super straightforward. Please don't be intimidated by them. Check out these 2 videos here if you're interested in learning more about fitting overall. With all that said, I hope you liked the video. Like, share, subscribe, all the places, all the stuff, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.